everyone, my name is Eric Masowski, and in this tutorial we're going to take a look at how we can mirror our face so we don't have to remodel the entire right hand side. We're also going to look at how we can set it up so that we only have to make changes to one side and those same changes get applied to the other. And finally, we're going to take a look at how we can subdivide our mesh and some of the issues that show up when we subdivide. Okay, so if you open up the file that came with this tutorial, we'll get started. Okay, so we select our object. Now there are several ways that we can mirror or copy our object. The first one is using the mirror tool up here at the top of the screen. We can choose which axis we want to mirror around, as well as whether we want to create a copy, instance, or reference. A copy creates a completely unique object. Instance creates kind of like a two-way communication between the clone and the original, meaning that if you modify one, the other one will be modified as well. Then reference is more like a one-way communication, where the clone will always mimic any changes that are done to the original, but not vice versa. The clone can be modified by itself. So that's what we want in this case. So if we position this over to where it needs to be, if we select our original object, and we start pulling points around, you can see how both sides get modified. Alright, now what this tool actually does is it applies an inverse scale matrix to whatever you had selected. What this actually means is that if you take this model into another program or you export it to, say, a real-time game engine, the normals on the clone side of the face could be inverted, or basically pointing the wrong way. So we rarely recommend using this unless you're just going to be rendering inside of Max, not taking the mesh anywhere else. So let's delete our clone and take a look at a couple other options. Okay, so we select our object again. We can right-click on it and go to Clone. Again, we have the same three options, so we'll choose Reference. And now you'll see that we have kind of like a bar above our Edit Poly. Everything below this bar is going to be duplicated on both sides. Everything above the bar will be specific to the clone. So if we go and we apply a mirror modifier, so you see how it shows up above the bar, we can now move it over to the side, and this is more exporter friendly. Okay, but yet there's still yet another way that's a little bit better than all of these. So let's delete our clone again, select our side of the face, and apply a symmetry modifier. Now initially, the symmetry modifier is oriented the wrong way, so we only get kind of like the center of the face. So first we need to flip the face. Now if we take a close look at it, you'll notice that it's too close. The axis in which it mirrors over, or the mirror plane, isn't set up correctly. So if we click on the plus sign next to symmetry, click on mirror, this turns its mirror plane into an object that we can move and orient however we want, orientate however we want. And so we basically just want to move it over just until we get them to join up. Click on mirror again to get out of the mode, and then there we go. We now have a nice solid mesh that if we drop down into editable poly mode, make some change, jump back up, we can see the change happen. Now, a lot of times when you're making these sort of changes, you want to see both sides as they're occurring. So what we can do is we can turn on show end result in our modifier stack. What this will do is it'll show or evaluate every modifier that sits above the current one. So now as I click and drag this around, we get a much more useful feedback. So we can just modify this however we need to. Okay, so let's say that we're happy with our mesh. We're going to turn off our edges so we're not bothered by them. But one thing to keep in mind when you're fixing your object is you don't want edges to come to sharp points like this. See how it goes in a sharp line straight up? You want to create these into a nice natural curve. Same with down here. Okay, you want your edges to flow always from one side to the other. Okay, so let's get out of vertex mode, hit F4 on the keyboard so that we can get a look at how our object looks. Now, there are a couple ways that you can smooth your object. The first is within Edit Poly itself. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you should see a tab called Subdivision Surface. If we click or activate Use NURMS Subdivision, you can see it ended up dividing our object. Now because we spend so much time making sure that our edge loops or our edges flowed one into the other, you notice that they keep that nice organization and flow. We can choose the number of iterations, so we can increase it quite high if we need to, or bring it back down. We also have the option of specifying a different number of iterations that will happen only when we render. So we can keep the iterations low while working on it, but when we go to render it, we can bump them way up to get very, very smooth surfaces. So let's take a look at what this actually did. Okay, so if we take a look at this, you'll notice that the chin here has a little bit of an artifact associated with it, and we're going to have to do some things like widen up the nose. I mean, that's pretty much a fault of the geometry. But if we also take a look at the lip, notice how much that's sticking out. Okay, that wasn't really noticeable when we had it in this mode, or without any sort of subdivision. So subdivision can also highlight key problems. Same with right here by the eye. See how puffy that is? It shouldn't be that far out. So if we actually go into vertex mode, while we have it subdivided, you see that we can see our low resolution cage. And we can now just continue to modify these points however we need. Now there's an additional way that we can set up a smooth surface. Now as mentioned earlier, the chin has a little bit of an artifact associated with it. And that's not uncommon when you're using the Edit Poly method, especially when you have the symmetry resting above it. The reason for this is that we're first smoothing the object, then we're mirroring it. So it's very possible that you're going to get some sort of artifacts right along the seam. So if I drag this around, you can see what happens down on the chin there. Okay, so let's take a look at another method. So underneath Editable Poly, go all the way back down to Subdivision Surface and turn off Use NURMS Subdivision to get back to our low polygon cage. Now jump back up to Symmetry or the top of the stack and apply a Turbo Smooth modifier. Now Turbo Smooth uses the same algorithm, the same NURMS algorithm as we had in Edit Poly. And so now this smoothing is happening after the symmetry. So we get much more predictable results. You can see we never get that pinching on the chin. Okay, so those are the two major ways of adding subdivision to your object. A couple other ones that you may want to explore for other types of shapes are either the Mesh Smooth modifier. You can also do the HSDS, or you can try playing with Subdivide or Tessellate. Okay, thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or post on the forums. Thank you.